In many of his stories, a tortured narrator would delve into deep wells of guilt. And through exploring that guilt, I think Poe approached something very close to modern psychoanalysis.
While not the first, Edgar Allan Poe was famous for his portrayal and creation of unreliable narrators. The term unreliable narrator was coined in 1961 by Wayne C. Booth in Rhetoric of Fiction, and applies to any character in literature, film, or theatre whose credibility has been damaged, such that we're not sure if the events they present are accurate or in some way twisted or limited. And while Poe obviously stands as one of its masterminds, most experimental storytellers have dabbled with the technique, and it's honestly pretty hard to miss once you know to look for it. Language icons like Flaubert, and even films like Forrest Gump, fall into the classification, making it a little more complex than simply being a story told from a limited perspective. You can start to appreciate that unreliable narration is kind of everywhere, and sometimes hard to miss. One classic example that comes up again and again in conversations about quality cinema is Memento. I consider Memento, and as do many others, to be one of Christopher Nolan's excellent attempts at maintaining experimentation and invention in cinema. Memento follows Leonard Shelby, who suffers from anterograde amnesia, which is to say he is unable to make new memories. Leonard instead takes Polaroid shots of friends, enemies, suspects, and locations in his attempts to discover the identity of his wife's killer. Coincidentally, his wife's murder is also the event that causes him to suffer from amnesia, meaning that, in effect, he's searching for the point where his life stopped happening.
And my solution to telling the story subjectively was to deny the audience the same information that the protagonist is denied. And my approach to doing that was to effectively tell the story backwards. That way, when we meet a character, we don't know, just like the protagonist, how he's met that person, whether he's even met that person before, or whether or not they should be trusted, that kind of thing.
We follow backwards and forwards through time, and the puzzle starts to fall into place, and as the watcher, we begin to realize not only who killed Leonard's wife, but perhaps more importantly, that Leonard has been lying to himself in the story he's been creating for himself. I think Scott Tobias from the AV Club hits the nail on the head when he said, and I quote, "Leonard lies to himself." And when he isn't outright lying to himself, he's guilty of confirmation bias, accepting only the facts that affirm his pre-cooked conclusions, and tossing out all the rest. Leonard is effectively constructing his own narrative for himself to follow. He's building up a story that he tells himself through his notes and Polaroids every time he wakes up the next day and has lost his memory. This reversal of what could have been the easy option to go with, in other words, to have Leonard be lied to only by others in the film, the idea that Leonard lies to himself is a manifestation of a particular unreliable narrator that Edgar Allan Poe used. In Poe's short story, The Cask of Amontillado, the narrator buries an old friend or enemy, we don't know which, alive in a crypt due to some unknown slight, luring and trapping this individual in a sickly, gothic underground walk where we slowly see the true motivations of our protagonist unfold. Equally, in Memento, this idea is translated to film through the use of Leonard's limited perspective. In both cases, we don't know what has happened that drives our characters. We don't know events that motivate the characters. We only know the motivations and a vague outline of what drives them.
Stay focused. Find a pen. Gotta write this down. Gotta write it down. Concentrate, concentrate, concentrate. Keep it in mind, keep it in mind, keep it in mind.
If you keep your eye out for limited perspectives and deliberately chosen silences, you might catch snippets of unreliable narration and storytelling pretty much everywhere. And if we can learn lessons from talented creatives like Poe, Nolan, and Flaubert, we might be able to elevate our ability to create and ultimately manipulate the most important part of our story: the tension.
We'll still be best friends. Or maybe even lovers.
Thanks for watching this one, guys. I had a really good time making it. I really love Memento. I think you should check it out. It's an amazing film. And if you're a friend of the show, then I definitely recommend you check out Gabriel Bergmose's new novel, Boone Shepherd. It's about a fun, sort of time-traveling detective. It's amazing. And I'm heading down to Melbourne on the day you're seeing this for the book launch. So the book will be out when you see this video. So if you want to order it, you can at belfrogbooks.com. You can get all of that information in the show notes down below. And as always, shout out to our Patreons. You guys do amazing work for us. Big shout out to Brendan A. McQuaid, who is always supporting us. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.
Chapter 1. I always take the time to appreciate the rolling green fields and pretty woods of the English countryside, whether I'm viewing them from the seat of my motorbike, or as I found myself on the day this story begins, hanging one-handed from the side of a speeding train. But it is hard to appreciate nature when you're viewing it at an angle, with your eyes full of soot and the wind throwing you around like the world's strangest flag. Any farmer pausing in their work to watch the train go by might have thought that a young man in a waistcoat, tie, and reading glasses was not exactly dressed for engine maintenance, extreme travel, or whatever else they might imagine I was doing. But this was not out of the ordinary for me. Journalism was a dangerous profession, and I'd been in worse situations in even less appropriate attire.